On March 31st, 2010, Jacob Cabinaw finished work, played frisbee golf with friends, and told them he was headed home to study for class, but he never made it back. And within just 72 hours, he would vanish across state lines, leaving behind a family, 2 children, and a trail of confusion. What happened to Jacob Cabinaw? And how does a man simply disappear after a normal night? Jacob Cabinaw was 31 years old when he went missing. A technical science student, a proud member of the National Guard, a father, a man with responsibilities and plans. On that spring evening in Traverse City, Michigan, Jacob dropped off a friend after a round of frisbee golf. He said he was going home to finish a school assignment, one that was due soon. But Jacob never returned to the house he shared with his mother. And just a few days later, when she still hadn't heard from him, she reported him missing. In the days that followed, strange clues emerged. A gas purchase hundreds of miles away, a surveillance photo in Texas, and then complete silence. No phone activity, no bank card use, no contact, nothing. Since April 2nd, 2010. 15 years later, the question still remains. Where did Jacob Cabinaw go? Jacob Cabinaw, known to those who loved him as Jake, was born on October 6, 1978, in Michigan. He was a proud member of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, and one of 10 siblings in a large, tightly knit family. Jake was the kind of kid who could make you laugh and fix your car in the same afternoon. According to his mother, Mavis Klaus, that balance of heart and discipline carried into adulthood. Jake married his high school sweetheart, Rachel. The two had 2 sons together, and by all accounts, he was a devoted father. Perhaps because he had grown up without a strong father figure himself, Jake was determined not to repeat that cycle. Jake worked full-time as a master mechanic at Dave's Garage, the most trusted shop in Traverse City. He also served proudly in the National Guard and was just 3 weeks shy of graduating from Northwestern Michigan College with a degree in technical science. On March 31st, 2010, Jake spent the evening doing something he loved, playing frisbee golf with his friend Gary Wittig. They joked around, caught up, and enjoyed the lake air. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. After the game, Jake dropped Gary off at a beachside park. Gary asked if he wanted to go grab a drink. Jake declined. He said he had to go home and study. That was the last time anyone who knew Jake saw him. When Jake didn't return home that night, his mother, Mavis, felt it in her bones. Something was wrong. Jake was not the kind of person to disappear without calling. He was responsible. He showed up. She tried calling his phone again and again, but every call went straight to voicemail. On April 2nd, just over 24 hours later, Mavis went to the police to report her son missing. But she was told what so many families have been told in those crucial early hours. So the family waited, powerless, and hoped Jake would walk through the door. But then, something happened that turned that hope into fear. On April 3rd, Mavis received a notification. Someone tried to withdraw $40 from Jake's account. The card was declined due to insufficient funds, completely unlike Jake, who was meticulous about money. That was it. That was the moment the family knew. Jake didn't just go off somewhere to blow off steam. Something was wrong. The family brought the bank records to police, and this time, authorities listened. The case was handed off to the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Department. The search for Jacob Cabinaw had officially begun. The last confirmed trace of Jacob Cabinaw comes from a gas station in Sweetwater, Texas, on April 4, 2010. His credit card was used to purchase fuel, a simple transaction, but one that took place over 1,700 miles from his home in Traverse City, Michigan. This would be the last known use of Jacob's debit card. As investigators began to unravel the mystery, they worked backwards, carefully retracing Jacob's movements from the night he left home. On March 31, 2010, around 8:30 p.m., Jacob uses his debit card to buy gas at a local station in Traverse City. Minutes later, the card is used again, between 8:30 and 9 p.m. at the Buckley General Store, about 17 miles south. Investigators believe this was likely for snacks and a drink, a routine pit stop. By 10:31 p.m., Jacob is in Cadillac, Michigan, another 40 miles further south, where $140 is withdrawn from an ATM. But here's the problem. There's no security footage, confirming it was Jacob who made the withdrawal. Still, based on available data, investigators believe Jacob was traveling alone. There's no sign of other vehicles following him. No passengers. He was still wearing the same work clothes he had on earlier that day. At this stage, nothing points to foul play. In fact, authorities initially believed Jacob had simply decided to take a spontaneous road trip without notifying family or friends. On April 1st, 2:36 p.m., Jacob's cell phone is used for the final time. He places a call to an automated National Guard system. Jacob received financial aid for his schooling from the National Guard and was required to call in at the beginning of every month to confirm that he was still a student. But what's strange is where that call came from. The phone pinged off a tower near Springfield, Missouri, over 800 miles from Traverse City. That's roughly 16 hours of continuous driving. And then the phone goes silent. Whether it was powered off or simply died, no further activity was recorded. Authorities now had a clearer picture. Jacob was headed south, most likely toward Texas, April 2nd, early morning, nearly 10 hours. After the phone pinged in Missouri and only about 50 miles further south, Jacob's license plate is reportedly checked by a local officer. Whether he was pulled over or not remains unclear. No ticket was issued, no warning. Likely, it was a routine scan on an unfamiliar out-of-state vehicle. But what was Jacob doing for those 10 missing hours between Springfield and this plate check? He probably wasn't sleeping, because just 3 hours later, an Arkansas sheriff's deputy spotted Jacob's silver 2002 Chevy Malibu parked at a rest stop near West Fork, off U.S. Route 71. The police officer ran his information, which confirmed that he was Jacob Cabinaw and had a valid driver's license. Again, he was the sole occupant of the vehicle. April 2nd, late morning. Roughly 8 hours later, and now 36 hours since Jacob was last seen in Traverse City, a failed attempt is made to withdraw $40 from an ATM in Ardmore. The card is declined. Jacob's account had insufficient funds, but that failed transaction sent a signal home. It's what alerted Jacob's mother that something wasn't right. Even more baffling, Ardmore isn't on a direct route from Arkansas to Texas. It's a significant detour west, adding several hours to the trip. April 2nd 1:26 p.m. 2 hours after the failed ATM withdrawal, Jacob's card is used successfully at a gas station in Fort Worth. A full tank of gas is purchased. Then another stop, and another fuel up, 3 hours later. But here's where the case twists even further. Why? After driving directly from Michigan to Texas, would Jacob suddenly divert west to Oklahoma? And how did he manage to make it from Michigan to Texas, over 1,700 miles, without purchasing more gas along the way? Where did he stop? Who, if anyone, was with him? And why didn't he call anyone? Not his girlfriend, not his children, not even his mother. When the video surveillance tape is examined, everyone questions whether or not. It's actually Jacob who's buying gas at the Sweetwater, Texas station. The car appears to be Jacob's vehicle, but the man in the grainy sun-flared video seems shorter and stockier than Jacob's tall, thin, 6-foot 2-inch frame, and he's not dressed in Jacob's work clothes. Jacob Cabinaw was now deep in Texas, far from the life he left behind. But what started as a series of strange choices was about to turn into a full-blown disappearance. Because after April 4th, there's nothing. No card activity, no phone records, no sightings. Jacob simply vanishes. While divorced, Cabinaw was on good terms with his ex-wife. He was not behind on child support. Rachel, Jacob's ex-wife, has been very helpful through this process. She had his cell phone in her name, so she was able to get all of his bills in August 2013, over 3 years after Jacob vanished. His ex-wife, Rachel, received an unexpected deposit in her bank account. $1,500. It came from the Army National Guard's Thrift Savings Plan, a military retirement fund Jacob had been enrolled in before he disappeared. Could Jacob have sent the money himself? For a moment, the family dared to hope. Maybe he was alive. Maybe this was his way of reaching out quietly. But the investigation hit another wall. There was no direct link to Jacob, no signature, no trace. Then, in May 2014, a tax return was filed in Jacob's name. Another glimmer, another chance to believe, until the FBI uncovered the truth. It was part of a fraud scheme, run through a tangle of shell companies. Once again, it wasn't Jacob. But through all the dead ends and disappointments, someone was still keeping Jacob's memory alive every single week. In the Lost and Found section of the local newspaper, an ad kept running. Jacob's sister, Sandra, assumed the paper was running it for free. But when the ad suddenly stopped, she called to ask why. And that's when she learned the truth. The ad had been paid for, weekly for years, by an ex-girlfriend of Jacob's brother. She had been hospitalized and simply couldn't renew it anymore. Sandra said it best. Our family took her in 20 years ago. I guess we really meant a lot to her, and she wanted to do something for us. When Jacob Cabinaw vanished, so did his car. A silver Chevy Malibu, gone without a trace. For years, investigators searched. Highways, back roads, databases, nothing. Until 7 years later, in 2017, a call came in. The National Insurance Crime Bureau flagged something big. Jacob's vehicle identification number, his VIN, had just shown up in Mexico. The Malibu, likely crushed, sitting in a scrapyard over 1,800 miles from Michigan. So the question is, How did Jacob's car end up in Mexico? Was he behind the wheel, or did someone else take it there? No one knows for sure. But the lead chilled investigators to the bone. And then there's Gary Wittig, the last known friend to spend time with Jacob before he disappeared. When Jacob vanished, Gary did something strange. He went silent, dropped off the radar for a few days. When he resurfaced, his explanation raised even more questions. He said, "I met someone that night. We went out partying. My phone died. That's why I didn't respond to anyone." He's never been named a suspect, never charged, but that's not all. According to local whispers, and even a few early news reports, Jacob may have had one last conversation before he vanished, with someone from his own neighborhood, a man known to police as a low-level drug runner. And the rumor? He made Jacob an offer. But what if it wasn't? What if it was a setup? What if Jacob Cabinaw was used as a pawn in something darker than he could have imagined? To be clear, none of this has ever been confirmed. It's now been over 15 years since Jacob Cabinaw was last seen. No phone calls, no texts, no sightings, only a trail of receipts and camera footage, ending in the dusty roads of Texas. To this day, his children are still waiting. His family still hopes. And his case remains one of Michigan's most puzzling unsolved disappearances. If you have any information about Jacob Cabinaw's disappearance, contact the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Department at 231-995-5002. Even the smallest clue could finally bring him home.